The 16th of July, 1944, the morning sun rose over the blood-soaked fields of Normandy, casting long shadows across a landscape that had become humanity's graveyard. In the turret of an M4 Sherman tank designated "In the Mood," a soft-spoken man from Farmersville, Texas, peered through his gun sight at 3 German Panther tanks positioned along a hedgerow 800 yards distant. Staff Sergeant Lafayette Green Poole, known simply as War Daddy to those who served under him, had no idea that this moment would mark the beginning of the most extraordinary tank-killing spree in American military history. Poole's hands moved with the practiced ease of a farmer inspecting his equipment, methodical, unhurried, deadly. His crew, the same 4 men who had landed with him on Omaha Beach 40 days earlier, waited in tense silence. Corporal Wilbur Red Reddle sat in the driver's position, his knuckles white against the steering levers. Private First Class Bert Close manned the bow gun, while Corporal Willis Oler served as the loader. In the assistant driver's seat sat Private Homer Davis, his young face already aged beyond his 19 years by the horrors they had witnessed together. The German Panthers represented everything the American tankers had learned to fear. With frontal armor 5 inches thick and a 75mm gun that could punch through a Sherman's armor at 2,000 yards, these steel beasts outclassed Poole's tank in every measurable way. The Americans called their Shermans Ronson lighters, a grim reference to the popular cigarette lighters' advertising slogan, "Lights every time," because of their tendency to burst into flames when hit. German tankers had coined their own nickname for the American tanks, Tommy Cookers. Yet Poole possessed something that transcended armor thickness and gun caliber. A hunter's instinct honed during countless hours stalking game through the East Texas pine forests, combined with an almost supernatural ability to read terrain and anticipate enemy movements. According to records maintained by the 3rd Armored Division's operations staff, and later documented in Stephen Zaloga's comprehensive work, Armored Champion, The Top Tanks of World War II, Poole would go on to achieve what many military historians still consider impossible: the confirmed destruction of 258 German armored vehicles in just 81 days of continuous combat. The first Panther never knew what killed it. Poole's 75mm armor-piercing round struck the German tank's thin side armor as it maneuvered to engage what its commander believed was Poole's position. The Panther erupted in flames, its ammunition cooking off in a series of secondary explosions that sent the turret spinning 20 feet into the air. The second Panther, realizing too late that the Americans had outflanked them, attempted to reverse into cover. Poole's second shot penetrated the engine compartment, immobilizing the beast. His third shot, fired with the cold precision of a man dispatching wounded livestock, found the crew compartment. The 3rd Panther commander made the fatal mistake of trying to run. Poole's 4th round that morning caught the German tank as it crested a small rise, the shell entering through the thinner rear armor and transforming 45 tons of steel into a funeral pyre for its 5-man crew. By the time the engagement ended, less than 4 minutes after Poole fired his first shot, 3 of Germany's most advanced tanks lay smoking in the Norman countryside, and the legend of the Texas farmer-turned-tank destroyer had claimed its first victims of what would become an unprecedented campaign of mechanized carnage. The 23rd of May, 1944, weeks before Poole would earn his fearsome reputation, he sat in a staging area near Southampton, England, writing a letter to his wife, Geneva, back in Farmersville. The words came slowly, carefully chosen to avoid the censors while conveying the weight of what lay ahead. He did not tell her about the nightmares that had plagued him since completing his tank gunnery training at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Dreams where he burned alive in a metal coffin, while his crew's screams echoed through the smoke. He did not mention the statistics their officers had shared during their final briefing. Average life expectancy for a Sherman tank in combat was estimated at 6 weeks. Poole had enlisted in the Army on the 3rd of December, 1941, just 4 days before Japanese bombs rained down on Pearl Harbor. At 21 years old, he had been working his family's cotton farm, a hard life that had given him the physical strength and mental toughness that would later prove essential to his survival. His decision to join the military surprised no one who knew him. Lafayette Poole had always possessed a quiet sense of duty that ran deeper than words could express. The U.S. Army Armor School at Fort Knox had transformed Poole from a farmer into a soldier, but it was his natural aptitude for gunnery that caught the attention of his instructors. According to training records preserved in the National Archives and referenced in Patrick O'Donnell's book, The Unknowns, The Untold Story of America's Unknown Soldier, Poole consistently scored in the top percentile of his class, demonstrating an almost preternatural ability to estimate range, calculate lead time, and adjust for wind and terrain. His instructors noted that he possessed exceptional situational awareness and target acquisition skills. What set Poole apart from other gunners, however, was his philosophy toward tank combat. While many American tankers had been trained to think of their Shermans as cavalry, fast, maneuverable, meant to exploit breakthroughs rather than engage in stand-up fights with German armor, Poole approached tank warfare with the mindset of a defensive fighter. He studied the German tanks with the same attention to detail he had once devoted to understanding the behavior of white-tailed deer. He learned their weaknesses: the thin side and rear armor, the vulnerable gun mantlets, the exposed engine decks. Most importantly, he understood that victory belonged not to the tank with the biggest gun, but to the crew that fired first and hit first. Poole's crew had been assembled during the final months of training before deployment. Red Reddle, a farm boy from Pennsylvania, shared Poole's rural background and possessed the same steady temperament. Bert Close, a mechanic from Michigan, could repair their Sherman under fire using nothing but wire, duct tape, and profanity. Willis Aller, despite being the youngest member of the crew, had hands that could load a 75mm round faster than any other loader in their battalion. Homer Davis rounded out the crew, his job operating the bow-mounted machine gun and assisting with navigation. The chemistry between these 5 men defied easy explanation. They came from different backgrounds, held different beliefs, possessed different dreams for the future. Yet from their first training exercise together, they functioned with a synchronization that seemed almost telepathic. Poole would later tell military interrogators that his crew could load, aim, and fire their main gun in under 6 seconds, a rate of fire that gave them a decisive advantage in the close-range hedgerow fighting that would characterize the Normandy campaign. On the 6th of June, 1944, Poole and his crew landed on Omaha Beach as part of the 3rd Armored Division's 32nd Armored Regiment. The scene that greeted them defied comprehension: burning vehicles, shattered equipment, and bodies rolling in the surf. Poole's Sherman, freshly painted with its name, "In the Mood," in white letters across the gun barrel, rolled off the landing craft into 3 feet of water. As they drove up the beach toward the bluffs, dodging craters and wreckage, Poole made a silent promise to his crew. He would get them home alive, no matter what it took. The 18th of June, 1944, Poole's crew experienced their first true test of combat near the village of Villers-Fossard, a collection of stone buildings and narrow lanes that had become a fortress for the German 2nd Panzer Division. The 3rd Armored Division had been tasked with pushing south from the invasion beaches, but every mile gained came at a horrific cost. The Norman bocage, ancient hedgerows that divided the countryside into a maze of small fields enclosed by earthen berms topped with dense vegetation, had transformed the open warfare American tankers had trained for into a claustrophobic nightmare of ambushes and point-blank engagements. Poole's platoon, 5 Shermans moving in a staggered column along a sunken road, had advanced perhaps 200 yards when the lead tank exploded in a gout of flame. A German Panzer IV, concealed in a gap in the hedgerow, had fired from less than 50 yards. The 75mm armor-piercing round had punched through the Sherman's frontal armor like tissue paper, igniting the ammunition stored in sponsons along the tank's sides. 4 of the 5 crew members died instantly. The 5th, the driver, managed to crawl from the burning wreck with 70% of his body covered in 3rd-degree burns. He would die in a field hospital 3 days later. The 2nd Sherman in the column attempted to reverse, but the narrow road and steep embankments made maneuvering impossible. The German tank fired again, and another American tank became a crematorium for its crew. Poole, commanding the 3rd Sherman in line, faced a decision that would define his approach to tank combat for the remainder of the war: retreat to safety, or charge forward into almost certain death. "Driver, full speed ahead." Poole's voice came across the intercom with the same tone he might have used to ask for salt at the dinner table. Red Reddle slammed the accelerator forward, sending the 33-ton Sherman lurching down the road toward the burning wrecks that blocked their path. Poole had spotted something the German tank commander had missed: a gap in the hedgerow on the right side of the road, wide enough for a Sherman to push through if the driver possessed the skill and the nerve. The Panzer IV's third shot missed, passing close enough to In the Mood's turret that Poole felt the pressure wave. Redl, understanding his commander's intent without need for further orders, wrenched the Sherman off the road and through the hedgerow gap, branches and earth showering down on the tank's hull as they crashed through into the field beyond. For 3 seconds they were blind, the gun sight filled with nothing but dirt and vegetation. Then they burst through into the open field, and Poole found himself looking at the exposed side armor of the German tank from a distance of 30 yards. According to the after-action report filed by Captain James Bates and preserved in the 3rd Armored Division's war diary, what happened next occurred with such speed that witnesses had difficulty believing a single tank crew could coordinate such a complex action. Poole's first shot struck the Panzer IV's turret ring, jamming the German tank's ability to traverse its gun. His second shot, fired 4 seconds later, penetrated the side armor and detonated the German tank's ammunition. The Panzer IV literally came apart, hull and turret separating as internal explosions tore through the crew compartment. But Poole's situational awareness, that almost supernatural ability to perceive threats before they materialized, saved his crew from sharing the fate of the 2 Shermans burning on the road. He had spotted a second German tank, a Panther, positioned in a tree line 300 yards to their front. The Panther's commander, focused on the slaughter taking place on the sunken road, had not yet noticed In the Mood's sudden appearance in the field. Poole had perhaps 10 seconds before the German spotted them. Target Panther, 12 o'clock, 300 yards. Poole's voice remained steady as he walked his crew through the engagement sequence they had practiced hundreds of times. Aller slammed a fresh armor-piercing round into the breach. Close adjusted their hull position, giving Poole a cleaner angle of attack. Redl kept the engine running at full power, ready to move the instant Poole gave the order. Davis swiveled the bow machine gun toward a squad of German infantry he had spotted taking cover in a nearby ditch. Poole fired. The armor-piercing round struck the Panther's gun mantlet, one of the few places on the German tank's frontal armor vulnerable to the Sherman's gun. The shell ricocheted downward, penetrating the thinner armor of the hull and killing the Panther's driver instantly. The German tank rolled forward out of control, crashing into a stone wall. Poole's second shot, aimed with deliberate precision at the now stationary target, finished the job. The 7th of July, 1944, 3 weeks into the campaign, Poole's crew had destroyed 19 German armored vehicles, a tally that would have earned most tank crews a rotation to the rear and a chest full of medals. Instead, 3rd Armored Division headquarters assigned In the Mood to increasingly dangerous missions, recognizing that Poole possessed a rare combination of skills that made him worth far more in combat than in a training role behind the lines. The crew's reputation had spread throughout the division. Other tank crews began requesting assignment near Poole's platoon, believing that proximity to the Texas farmer might somehow increase their own chances of survival. The reality of armored combat in Normandy bore little resemblance to the sweeping tank battles American crews had been trained to fight. Instead of the open terrain that favored the Sherman's speed and numerical superiority, the bocage forced tanks into brutal close-range duels, where the German tank's superior armor and firepower provided a decisive advantage. A study conducted by the U.S. Army's Operational Research Section, and later cited in historian Michael Dubler's work, Closing with the Enemy: How GIs Fought the War in Europe, found that the average engagement range in the bocage was under 300 yards, close enough that German anti-tank weapons could penetrate Sherman armor with devastating effectiveness. Poole adapted to the hedgerow fighting by developing tactics that maximized his crew's advantages, while minimizing exposure to enemy fire. He refused to advance down roads, even when ordered to do so, instead using In the Mood's bulk to smash through hedgerows at unexpected points. He studied the patterns of German defensive positions, learning to identify the subtle signs that indicated enemy armor lay in wait. Disturbed vegetation, track marks in the mud, the faint blue haze of exhaust smoke hanging in still air. Most critically, Poole understood that survival in the bocage required aggressive action. While other crews cautiously probed German positions, Poole attacked with a speed and violence that gave enemy tank commanders no time to react. He would later explain his philosophy to a reporter from Stars and Stripes. "A Sherman can't slug it out with a Panther or a Tiger. We'd lose every time. But if you hit them first, hit them hard, and hit them before they even know you're there, you can kill any tank the Germans have." On this particular morning, Poole's platoon had been tasked with clearing a series of fields north of St. Lo, a key road junction that had become the focal point of American offensive operations. Intelligence reported that elements of the Panzer Lehr Division, one of Germany's most elite armored formations, had moved into the area overnight. Poole's company commander, a captain named Richard Foster, had briefed the mission with uncharacteristic brevity. "Gentlemen, we need those fields cleared by nightfall. Good luck." The first two fields yielded nothing but abandoned German positions and the wreckage of an earlier battle. In the third field, Poole's crew found 5 German tanks, 2 Panthers, and 3 Panzer IVs, positioned in a hedgerow tree line with their guns oriented toward the expected American approach from the north. Poole, approaching from the east after smashing through 2 hedgerows that intelligence had deemed impassable, found himself looking at the broadside of the entire German position from a range of 400 yards. What followed would be described by Captain Foster in his after-action report as the most impressive display of tank gunnery I have witnessed in this war. Poole's first shot destroyed the nearest Panther, the armor-piercing round striking the ammunition storage in the tank's hull and causing a catastrophic explosion that killed the entire crew. Before the other German tanks could traverse their turrets toward this new threat, Poole fired again, his second shot crippling a Panzer IV by destroying its tracks and road wheels. The remaining 3 German tanks attempted to maneuver, but the close confines of the hedgerow position that had seemed such a perfect defensive location now became a trap. One Panzer IV backed into another while trying to gain an angle on "In the Mood," fouling both tanks. Poole's third and fourth shots, fired with the methodical precision of a farmer stacking hay bales, destroyed both immobilized tanks. The final Panther, commanded by an officer who recognized that discretion represented the better part of valor, abandoned its position and fled across the field, only to run directly into the guns of Poole's platoon mate, Sergeant John McVeigh. The 29th of July, 1944, Operation Cobra, the massive breakout from Normandy, transformed the static warfare of the hedgerows into a war of movement that played to American strengths. More than 2,000 Allied bombers carpet-bombed German positions west of St. Lo, creating a 5-kilometer-wide corridor of devastation through which American armored divisions would pour into the French countryside. Poole's 3rd Armored Division spearheaded the assault, their orders simple and direct: drive south, destroy everything with a swastika on it, and don't stop until you reach the German border. The breakout's first days proved to be among the most dangerous of Poole's combat career. German forces, reeling from the devastating aerial bombardment, fought with the desperation of cornered animals. Poole's crew found themselves engaging enemy armor at every crossroads, in every village, along every ridgeline. The tally of destroyed German vehicles climbed with dizzying speed: 43 destroyed by the 2nd of August, 61 by the 5th, 92 by the 10th. The crew of In the Mood operated in a state of constant exhaustion, sleeping in 2-hour shifts while parked in concealment, eating cold rations heated on the Sherman's engine deck, and maintaining their tank during brief lulls between engagements. Red Reddle suffered from infected hands where hot brass from the main gun had burned him. Bert Close lost 15 pounds from his already lean frame, sustained by coffee and cigarettes. Willis Aller developed a persistent cough from breathing cordite fumes in the cramped turret. Homer Davis stopped speaking except when absolutely necessary, his eyes acquiring a 1,000-yard stare that would never fully disappear. Yet Poole himself seemed to grow stronger as the campaign progressed. His crew noted with a mixture of awe and unease that their commander appeared to possess an almost supernatural ability to sense danger. On 3 separate occasions, Poole ordered Red Reddle to change course seconds before German anti-tank guns opened fire from positions they were approaching. Twice, Poole detected German tanks lying in ambush despite no visible evidence of their presence. The crew began to speak in hushed tones about Poole's 6th sense, a gift that kept them alive when better armored and better positioned tanks fell victim to German guns. The reality, as Poole would later explain to military historians, was less mystical and more methodical. He had studied German tactics with the same attention he had once devoted to understanding the movement patterns of game animals. He knew that German commanders favored certain types of terrain for ambush positions. He understood how to read the landscape for signs of recent vehicle movement. Most importantly, he trusted his instincts, those indefinable sensations that every experienced hunter learns to heed. The feeling that something is wrong even when the conscious mind cannot identify the source of concern. On the 14th of August, 1944, Poole's remarkable combat record nearly came to an abrupt and violent end. In the Mood had been advancing along a road near the town of Chambois when Poole spotted what appeared to be an abandoned Tiger tank positioned in a grove of trees approximately 600 yards ahead. The Tiger, Germany's most formidable tank, mounted an 88mm gun that could destroy a Sherman at ranges exceeding 2,000 yards. Its frontal armor, over 4 inches thick, was effectively impregnable to the Sherman's 75mm gun. Poole, exercising the caution that had kept his crew alive, ordered Redl to halt while he studied the German tank through his gun sight. Something about the scene troubled him. The Tiger's placement seemed too obvious, too inviting. A less experienced commander might have attempted to bypass the apparently disabled tank or called for artillery support. Poole, trusting his instincts, suspected a trap. His suspicions proved correct when movement in a hedgerow to their right revealed a second Tiger, this one very much operational and maneuvering to catch, in the Mood, in a crossfire with its companion. Poole had less than 3 seconds to make a decision that would determine whether his crew lived or died. Charging either Tiger head-on would be suicide. The Sherman's gun simply could not penetrate the German tank's frontal armor. Retreat would expose in the Mood's thinner rear armor and likely result in the same outcome. Poole chose a third option, one that required split-second timing and absolute trust in his crew's abilities. "Driver, hard right into that hedgerow. Move, move, move." Redl responded instantly, sending the Sherman crashing through the vegetation and into the field beyond. Poole had gambled that the field would provide some form of concealment or a different angle of attack. His gamble paid off. The field contained a slight depression, just deep enough to hide in the Mood's hull from the Tiger's gun sights. For 2 minutes, Poole and his crew sat motionless in the depression, listening to the sound of the 2 Tigers maneuvering on the road they had just vacated. Poole knew that their survival depended on remaining undetected. If the German tank commanders realized where In the Mood had gone, they could simply advance to the hedgerow and fire down into the depression at point-blank range. The tension in the Sherman's crew compartment was so intense that Poole could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. The 14th of August, 1944, continued. Poole watched through a tiny gap in the hedgerow as the 2 Tiger tanks rumbled past their position, their commanders clearly searching for the American tank that had so suddenly disappeared. The German tankers made a crucial tactical error born of overconfidence. They separated, with one Tiger continuing down the road while the second turned to investigate the hedgerow through which In the Mood had crashed. The separation gave Poole the opening he needed, though the odds remained decidedly against him. The second Tiger, the one investigating the hedgerow, approached to within 75 yards of Poole's position before stopping. Poole could see the massive tank's commander standing in the open hatch, scanning the field with binoculars. The German officer wore the black uniform of the Panzer forces, his collar decorated with the insignia of a Hauptmann, a captain. Poole watched as the German slowly swept his binoculars across the field, knowing that any movement, any glint of sunlight off metal, would reveal their position and seal their fate. The Hauptmann's binoculars passed over the depression where In the Mood lay hidden, then stopped and swung back. Poole saw the exact moment when the German officer realized what he was looking at. The man's body stiffened, his hand reached for the intercom to alert his crew. Poole fired. At 75 yards, the laws of physics that normally favored the Tiger's heavier armor became meaningless. Poole's armor-piercing round struck the Tiger's side armor, penetrating through the sponson and into the crew compartment. The German captain, standing in the open hatch, died instantly when the round's explosive filler detonated. The Tiger's crew, trapped in a compartment rapidly filling with toxic fumes and shrapnel, had no chance to escape before secondary explosions from stored ammunition cooked off, transforming the tank into a towering pillar of fire. The first Tiger, alerted by the explosion, turned back toward Poole's position. Its commander, unable to see in the mood clearly through the smoke and vegetation, made another fatal mistake. He advanced directly down the road, presenting his tank's side armor to Poole's gun. According to accounts preserved in the 3rd Armored Division's historical records and referenced in Belton Cooper's memoir, Death Traps, Poole fired 3 rounds in quick succession. The first shot destroyed the Tiger's tracks, immobilizing the behemoth. The second penetrated the engine compartment, starting a fire that would eventually spread to the crew compartment. The third shot, fired deliberately at the Tiger's turret ring, jammed the German tank's ability to traverse its gun or elevate its barrel. The German crew bailed out, abandoning their crippled tank to the flames. Poole watched through his gun sight as 5 men stumbled away from their burning vehicle, their black uniforms smoldering, faces blackened by smoke. He did not order his crew to fire on them. Poole killed tanks, not men attempting to surrender. The German tankers, recognizing their unexpected mercy, raised their hands and walked toward American lines. That evening, as Poole's crew performed maintenance on In the Mood in a hastily secured field, Captain Foster arrived with a bottle of confiscated German schnapps and an unusual request. 3rd Armored Division's commander, Major General Morris Rose, had taken a personal interest in Poole's combat record. Rose, a hard-driving officer who had earned a reputation as one of the most aggressive divisional commanders in the European theater, wanted to meet the tank crew that was accounting for an extraordinary percentage of the division's confirmed armor kills. The meeting took place the following morning at division headquarters, a commandeered French farmhouse that still bore scars from recent fighting. Poole, uncomfortable in the presence of senior officers, stood at attention while General Rose reviewed a detailed list of confirmed kills compiled by division intelligence. Rose, the son of a rabbi who had earned his commission on the battlefields of World War I, studied Poole with the intense gaze of a man who had spent decades evaluating soldiers under combat conditions. Sergeant Poole. Rose's voice carried the faint accent of his Colorado upbringing. I've been commanding armored forces since before you were born. I've seen good tank crews, and I've seen lucky tank crews. You and your men are neither. You're the best damn tank killers in this entire army, and I want to know how you do it. Poole, never comfortable with praise, gave the only answer he knew to give. Sir, we hunt them like deer. We learn their habits, we find their hiding spots, and we shoot first. That's all there is to it. Rose studied Poole for a long moment, then nodded. That's the most honest tactical assessment I've heard since we landed on this god-forsaken continent. Carry on, Sergeant. Keep your crew alive, and keep killing German tanks. The General's endorsement brought unexpected consequences. 3rd Armored Division's public relations officer, recognizing the propaganda value of Poole's story, arranged for a reporter from Stars and Stripes to interview the crew. The resulting article, published on the 23rd of August, 1944, introduced Poole to a wider American audience as the Texas farmer who's giving Hitler's panzers hell. Poole hated the attention. He was a soldier doing his job, not a hero seeking glory. But the article served a purpose beyond simple propaganda. American tankers, demoralized by their equipment's inferiority to German armor, found hope in Poole's success story. The 19th of September, 1944, Poole's crew crossed into Germany itself, their Sherman's tracks grinding over soil that had been part of the Third Reich. The Allied armies had swept across France with a speed that astonished both German defenders and Allied commanders. The rapid advance, however, came with a cost. Supply lines stretched to the breaking point, and the armored spearheads began to outrun their fuel and ammunition. The war, which had seemed on the verge of ending by Christmas, settled into a grinding campaign of attrition along Germany's western borders. Poole's combat tally had reached 212 confirmed kills by the time 3rd Armored Division reached the outskirts of Aachen, the first major German city in the path of the Allied advance. The crew of In the Mood had become something of a legend within the division. their reputation inflated by the natural tendency of soldiers to embellish stories in the retelling. Some claimed Poole could see through hedgerows. Others swore he had made a pact with the devil in exchange for his uncanny survival. The truth, as always, was more mundane. Poole was simply a superbly trained soldier leading an exceptional crew, and they had been fortunate enough to survive where better men had died. The battle for Aachen tested Poole's skills and his crew's cohesion in ways that the relatively open fighting in France had not. Urban combat negated many of the Sherman's advantages, while amplifying its weaknesses. The narrow streets channeled tanks into kill zones where German anti-tank guns and Panzerfausts, shoulder-fired anti-tank rockets, could strike with devastating effectiveness. The close quarters made it impossible to detect and engage enemy armor at range, Poole's preferred method of fighting. On the 29th of September 1944, Poole's crew engaged in what would prove to be their final successful action of the war. In the Mood had been supporting an infantry assault on a fortified factory complex when a German Panther tank appeared from a side street less than 100 yards away. The Panther's commander, caught by surprise in a tight urban environment, fired hastily. The German round struck in the Mood's turret at an angle, the shell glancing off the curved armor rather than penetrating. The impact, however, was violent enough to momentarily stun Poole and throw off his aim. Aller, demonstrating the cool professionalism that had made him an exemplary loader, had already chambered a fresh round before the ringing in everyone's ears subsided. Poole, recovering quickly, fired at the Panther from a range that made missing almost impossible. The armor-piercing round penetrated the German tank's thinner side armor, and another Panther joined the growing list of Poole's confirmed kills. It was his 258th victory in 81 days of continuous combat, a record that stands to this day as the highest confirmed kill count by an American tank crew in any conflict. 3 hours later, on that same afternoon of the 29th of September, Poole's extraordinary luck finally ran out. In the Mood was advancing down a rubble-strewn street when a German Panzerfaust team fired from a basement window 15 yards away. The shape-charge warhead struck the Sherman's front hull, penetrating the armor and entering the crew compartment. The resulting explosion and fire killed Homer Davis instantly and severely wounded both Poole and Bert Close. Red Redl, despite suffering burns on his arms and face, managed to evacuate the wounded while Willis Aller provided covering fire with the turret-mounted machine gun. American infantry, responding to the Sherman's distress, suppressed the German position and secured the burning tank. Poole, semi-conscious and in shock from his wounds, reportedly asked Redl about the status of their main gun. Even as medics loaded him onto a stretcher, the Texas farmer was still thinking about how to continue the fight. Poole survived his wounds but never returned to combat. The injuries he sustained, including severe burns and shrapnel wounds to his legs, required months of hospitalization and rehabilitation. He was evacuated first to a field hospital in Belgium, then to England, and finally to a military hospital in the United States. The Army, recognizing both his extraordinary combat record and the propaganda value of his survival, had no intention of sending him back to the front lines. The crew of In the Mood was scattered by the fortunes of war. Red Redl recovered from his wounds and returned to combat with a different crew, surviving the war and returning to his Pennsylvania farm. Willis Aller also returned to combat and was killed in action during the Battle of the Bulge in December of 1944, dying in the same manner as Homer Davis, when a German anti-tank weapon penetrated his Sherman's armor. Bert Close survived his wounds but never fully recovered, spending the remainder of his life dealing with the physical and psychological scars of his service. The 11th of November, 1945, Poole stood on the platform of a small train station in Farmersville, Texas, his uniform decorated with the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and the Purple Heart. The war in Europe had ended 6 months earlier with Germany's unconditional surrender. The war in the Pacific had concluded in August, with Japan's capitulation following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Poole had come home to a nation celebrating victory, to parades and speeches and ceremonies honoring the men who had fought. He had also come home to a reality that no parade could address, the nightmares that woke him in the middle of the night, the way his hands shook when he heard loud noises, the faces of German tankers he had killed, that appeared unbidden in his mind. Poole struggled with what modern medicine would diagnose as post-traumatic stress disorder, though in 1945 the condition was called combat fatigue, or shell shock, and carried a stigma that prevented many veterans from seeking help. Geneva Poole, the woman who had waited faithfully for her husband's return, became his anchor in the difficult transition from warrior to civilian. She never asked about the details of his combat service, instinctively understanding that some experiences resist translation into words. She helped him rebuild a life focused not on the past, but on the future. On the farm they would work together, on the children they would raise, on the quiet dignity of a life lived away from the public eye. Poole's wartime fame proved fleeting. The American public, eager to move beyond the war's trauma, quickly forgot the names of individual heroes in favor of collective memory. Poole himself actively avoided publicity, declining interviews, and rarely speaking about his combat service except with other veterans who could understand the weight of what they had experienced together. He returned to farming, finding peace in the familiar rhythms of planting and harvest, in physical labor that left him too exhausted to dream. The historical significance of Poole's combat record has been documented in numerous scholarly works examining American armored warfare in World War II. Researchers have noted that his 258 confirmed kills in 81 days represents a rate of destruction that exceeded the performance of entire tank companies. More remarkably, Poole achieved this record while suffering only one crew fatality, Homer Davis, a testament to his tactical acumen and his unwavering commitment to his men's safety. Military analysts studying Poole's tactics have identified several factors that contributed to his success. First, his insistence on aggressive action contradicted the defensive mindset that often paralyzed Sherman crews facing superior German armor. Second, his hunter's instinct for terrain and his ability to anticipate enemy positions gave him a crucial first-shot advantage in most engagements. Third, and perhaps most importantly, Poole welded his crew into a cohesive fighting unit where each man understood his role and executed with precision under the most extreme stress. The crew's longevity, operating together from their landing on Omaha Beach through 81 days of continuous combat, was itself extraordinary. The average Sherman crew in the European theater experienced casualty rates approaching 75%, with most tanks going through multiple crews before being destroyed or withdrawn from service. That Poole's crew remained largely intact through such extended combat testified to both their skill and their remarkable good fortune. Poole lived quietly until his death on the 21st of May, 1991, at the age of 70. He spent his final decades as a respected member of his community, known more for his work with the local veterans organization and his service to his church than for his wartime exploits. Those who knew him in his later years often expressed surprise when they learned of his combat record. The soft-spoken farmer seemed an unlikely candidate for the title of America's greatest tank ace. In the years following Poole's death, military historians have reassessed his accomplishments within the broader context of armored warfare. Dr. Stephen Zaloga, in his comprehensive analysis of American tank operations during World War II, noted that Poole's success contradicted the prevailing narrative of American armor's inferiority. While it remained true that German tanks possessed superior armor and firepower, Poole demonstrated that crew quality, tactical innovation, and aggressive leadership could overcome material disadvantages. The story of Lafayette Poole and his crew serves as a reminder that warfare's outcomes are determined not merely by technology and industrial capacity, but by the skill, courage, and determination of individual soldiers. Poole's 258 confirmed kills represented not just destroyed enemy vehicles, but prevented attacks on American infantry, saved countless Allied lives, and contributed materially to the defeat of Nazi Germany. Each destroyed tank removed a potent weapon from the German arsenal at a time when every engagement mattered, when the outcome of the war still hung in balance. Yet Poole himself would likely have rejected such grandiose assessments of his contribution. In one of his rare interviews, conducted by a military historian in 1983, Poole was asked how he wanted to be remembered. His response reflected the humility that characterized his entire life. "I was just a soldier doing my job. Nothing special about it. I had a good crew. We were trained well. and we were lucky. That's all there is to tell. This self-assessment, while characteristic of Poole's modesty, fails to capture the full measure of his achievement. Luck certainly played a role in his survival. Every combat veteran understands that the margin between life and death often comes down to inches and seconds beyond any individual's control. But luck alone cannot account for 81 consecutive days of successful combat operations, for 258 enemy tanks destroyed, for a crew that functioned with such precision under fire that they became the standard against which other tank crews measured themselves. The crew of In the Mood represented the best of their generation. Ordinary men thrust into extraordinary circumstances who rose to meet challenges that would have broken lesser individuals. They came from America's farms and small towns, from working-class families that had endured the Depression and now faced a war that threatened civilization itself. They volunteered for service when their country called, trained with dedication, fought with skill and courage, and returned home, those who survived, to build quiet lives defined not by their wartime glory, but by their peacetime contributions to their communities. Red Reddle returned to his Pennsylvania farm and raised 5 children, never speaking publicly about his wartime service, except to attend annual reunions with other 3rd Armored Division veterans. Willis Aller, who died during the Battle of the Bulge, left behind a young wife and an infant son who would grow up knowing his father only through letters and photographs. Bert Close struggled with his injuries for the remainder of his life, but found purpose in working with disabled veterans, helping others navigate the same challenges he faced. Homer Davis, killed in action at age 19, was buried in an American military cemetery in Belgium, his sacrifice commemorated on a white marble cross that stands among thousands of identical markers. The Sherman tank In the Mood, damaged beyond economical repair after the Panzerfaust attack that ended Poole's combat career, was stripped for spare parts and eventually scrapped. No effort was made to preserve the vehicle as a historical artifact. In 1944, no one imagined that future generations would value such relics of a war everyone wanted desperately to forget. Today, military museums display restored Shermans, but none can claim to be the actual tank in which Poole and his crew made history. The absence of physical artifacts has not prevented Poole's story from inspiring subsequent generations of American tankers. At Fort Knox, where Poole received his initial armor training, instructors still reference his tactics when teaching tank gunnery. The principle of aggressive action, of seizing initiative rather than reacting to enemy movements, has become doctrine in American armored forces. Poole's emphasis on crew cohesion and his insistence on protecting his men while accomplishing the mission has influenced leadership training across all military branches. In the final accounting, Lafayette Green Poole's legacy extends beyond statistics and tactical innovations. His story affirms a fundamental truth about warfare: that individual skill and determination matter, that leadership and courage can overcome material disadvantages, and that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary achievements when circumstances demand it. The Texas farmer, who destroyed 258 German tanks in 81 days, reminds us that heroism often comes wrapped in humility, that greatness frequently emerges from unexpected places, and that the measure of a man is found not in the glory he seeks, but in the duty he performs regardless of recognition or reward. Poole's final resting place, a simple grave in a Farmersville cemetery, bears a headstone that lists his name, his dates of birth and death, and his military service. There is no mention of his combat record, no enumeration of his confirmed kills, no proclamation of his status as America's greatest tank ace. The stone's simplicity would have pleased Poole, who spent his life avoiding attention and deflecting praise. Yet those who know his story cannot visit that grave without reflecting on the remarkable achievements of the man who lies beneath it. A farmer who became a warrior, who excelled at a terrible craft, who led his crew through 81 days of hell, and who returned home to live out his years in the quiet dignity that characterized his entire life. The story of Lafayette Poole and the crew of In the Mood stands as a testament to the citizen soldiers who won World War II, not through superior technology or overwhelming resources, though both helped, but through skill, courage, and an unwavering commitment to duty. They were ordinary Americans asked to do extraordinary things, and they met every challenge with a determination and competence that changed the course of history. Their legacy endures not in monuments or museums, but in the freedom they secured and the example they set for all who would follow in their footsteps.